Hello and welcome back to Dukascopy TV. I'm Natalie MacDonald. Joining us back in the studio now is Jean-François Owczarczak of MJT to discuss some of your favourite trading pairs. Jean-François, thank you for coming back in.
Thank you, Natalie, for having me again. And we're back on our Dukascopy directory and our FinGraphs website.
We're going to start off with the dollar rates, if you'd like to begin.
Please. So we're going to go back to the hourly mosaic. So we looked at the mosaic last week, and we had still a green beam on the euro and on the pound, and we're wondering if we were getting close to a reversal of that trend. And it seems like the reversal did happen, and now we see that euro dollar and cable are heading down. Now, just before we go into them in detail, euro dollar has gone through the corrective targets. It's already pointing to impulsive targets. So that's quite a sign that this trend should continue. We still need the confirmation from cable, which is still in the corrective down target, and it would need to make it below these corrective down targets to initiate an impulsive move. Now let's go quickly to euro dollar.
There's not been a huge amount of data impacting this pair in the beginning of the trading week. However, we do have the meeting of finance ministers in Brussels taking place today, so that could have a bit of an impact. But what are we seeing so far?
Well, basically, the first thing, well, the long term is still heading down. There's a bit of instability on the daily, which is now showing a bull. I mean, the envelopes were quite flat. Now, just showing you that you have no targets here. When the targets are in contradiction with the trend, which is the case here, we prefer not to have any signal or not any target beam here. So basically, we could call this a sideways move. But envelopes over the longer term are still heading down, and the risk index is still quite high. So that would still be a negative on the risk index, slightly positive on the trend, basically a neutral situation.
So while there's no target downwards necessarily, we are seeing trends shifting a little further in the negative.
Well, I mean, it's much more visible here on the hourly, and it's visible also because we made it through the corrective targets, and we are also pointing down now to impulsive targets. We did have a lot of exaggeration on the risk index and a few points of exaggeration, which is always good to turn a trend. And so now, if we focus here on the hourly, we could have a look at targets which could bring us towards the 128, 127 level over the next few weeks. Now remember, last week we were around here, and our target was to make it below 130. Now the next targets, which were the corrective targets, the next targets are now 128 to 127. Now maybe focus on the trader's view to get a short-term picture here. And so the trader's view, well, it's the 60-minute, which gives a perspective over the next a few days. It's still heading down. The 15 minutes over the next few hours is still heading down. And the 4 minutes is in a slight reaction up. Now this reaction up is not confirmed by the targets either. And we could see here we just had stress on the envelopes and just had an overbought situation in the risk index. So for the time being, we would here look at the 60 minutes and say, well, there's a bit more to go towards the 28.60, 29.50 mark. There's a bit of exaggeration here, hence the lateral correction that we've seen at the moment, but there's still time left to reach these targets. Now if we look at the 15 minutes, well, we're already in an I2 situation, so although it doesn't seem quite finished, there's probably a bit of a potential once this target is reached again for a rebound during the week. But all in all, I would focus here on the 60 minutes, which is still heading down towards the low 29s, high 28s level, and on the hourly, which is pointing a bit lower over the next few weeks. Now back into the mosaic, and let's look at the pound. And well, the cable is still negative over the long term. It's still in monitoring this correction up on the daily. And if we look here, well, we reached the target and it's turning back down again now. So that's quite a nice move up, and was well calibrated by our corrective up targets. And now if you look at the hourly, what needs a tiny bit more than the euro to prove that this could turn impulsive. Basically, the 52.93 mark here, or the 152.93 mark, would be would be the trigger to start an impulsive move. So a bit of, a bit more potential down here over the short term, but we may see the pound work its way through here a bit before it breaks through the corrective targets. Now, to have a closer look at that, let's look at the trader's view. And the trader's view, well, it seems like the impulsive targets are leading us towards that situation, going through the corrective targets on the hourly. But as you see, there's a stress here, strong exaggeration, so we could see a bit of a correction up during the beginning of the week. And that correction up is starting to be initiated on the 15-minute chart here. We would start maybe to consider a stronger reversal if we made it above 154.17 that we see here. Now, just going back to the mosaic, I wanted to focus on the yen. They were pretty much in the same situation as the euro and the pound last week, but this year has been very particular on the yen with the easing, and it's hard to find correlations these days between the yen and other currencies. Last week, what we said is that we could see a reversal here, but it would probably take a few more days. Well, that few more days were very strong, but it seems like we're slowly getting towards a zone which isn't strong exaggeration. I mean, our targets are touching each other. The index is in the risk index, and the target time is getting towards an end. That said, there's a bit more potential on the daily, but we're probably getting closer over the next few weeks of an intermediate top. Over the longer term, on the weekly, there's still very much a potential here for the yen easing. Now, just wanted to go to gold and have a look at the investor's view is still heading down, and we could flag here that we made it below the corrective target, so there's quite a lot of risk. Doesn't mean that we'll reach these in a few weeks, but it gives us a long-term risk perspective that we'll have to watch out for. Now, on the dailies, we reached our initial targets here, but it's still a lot of time to work our way through this zone. We did see a nice correction up on this exaggeration, but it seems like it's slowly rolling over again. And that we can see on the hourly here, which was still positive last week, but has rolled over. And we can see that it seems to have been a new top on the risk index here. So it's probably the end of this correction up, and we would expect that to go retest the lows. Now, maybe on the trader's view, a quick flick. Well, still heading down here on the 60-minute, 15-minute, slight corrections up on the 4-minute. Maybe a bit of curve of a correction up during the week, but over the next week or 10 days, it's still heading down. So confirming the rolling over. I also wanted to come back on equities. I mean, I was here in the studio back in September, and you asked me your typical question.
The Dukascopy question, $1 million US for 1 year, and you chose equities.
And I chose equities, which sounded a bit awkward at the time because equities were not doing too well.
Something you'd still stand by?
Well, I just wanted to have a look at it today. So we'd go on our main directory, which has a Reuters feed, go into the main markets, and go into main equity indices here. And I'll have a quick look on the daily. And although we don't think it's quite over yet, and it could extend into the autumn, shorter term, we're slowly getting to at least what is an intermediate top. And we can see from last September, it's gone quite a long way, and most of the targets here are getting fulfilled.
Well, we're seeing an uptrend pretty much across the board, aren't we?
We are, and apart from a few markets which have been very strong and are showing our impulsive 2 targets, which are very aggressive, most of the impulsive targets are slowly being done and fulfilled. So when is that going to happen? Well, if we look at the hourly, which is the more shorter term, it seems like there's probably another week, 10 days to go before we create an intermediate top here.
Okay.
And we think that intermediate top could correct into June, and that we'll probably maybe see a new rally into the summer to finish off the move.
Jean-François, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Jean-François will be back in the studio next Tuesday with my colleague Natalie MacDonald, so we look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye for now.